There's a statistic that says that only about 20% of people really like change. There's quite a bit of resistance that's happening when we're going through change. Lack of emotional intelligence or lack of self-awareness, we might not realize that we're going through some of these activators, if you will, around change. So talk more about your brain on change, and what are some signs that you're kind of like having to either help yourself or help your team get better at it. Yeah.
So to put it simply, your brain, as you learn to do things, your brain starts creating neuronal pathways in your brain. And the more you use these pathways, so every time you do something the same way, every time you think about something the same way, every time you remember something the same way, each of these pathways are getting thicker and stronger, and what happens is information flows faster.
Okay.
So if you think about driving a car, right? We like to use that metaphor a lot. When you first learned how to drive a car, everything was clunky, right? There were so many things that you had to pay attention to, so many things that you had to get right and do in sync, and it was really hard. But as your brain, as you continue to repeat the same behaviors over and over again, you do things automatically because those neuronal pathways have thickened, and because information is traveling so fast that you don't even think about it anymore. What happens during change is that what we're saying is we're telling those pathways, nope, we're not going to use you anymore. We're going to actually shift and create new pathways. But before that happens, what you're competing with is the pathways that are already there. Because these pathways are already so thick and so embedded that it actually takes time for these to atrophy, right? So that you can build new pathways.
Wow. Having information is great. Having resources to help you expand upon that information is even better. Click on the QR code and you can go to our online course library where you'll find more information on this topic. In addition, you'll find other helpful topics for your team and for yourself. You said something that's fascinating to me. I know that we need to build new neurons, but you're saying that the pathways that we've already built have to atrophy before we can really solidify new pathways. That's powerful because it really is implying that the older we get or the more we do things, the harder it is to make change, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So, tell us more about how we push past that.
Yeah, so how we push past that is repetition. Right? Number one, we want to understand that, going back to your original question, some of the emotions that we can feel, right, around that is there's resistance that comes, right? Feelings of, I don't want to do this because it's hard. Because now all of a sudden it's not automatic. It actually takes effort, right? Uncertainties that arise. I don't know if this change is going to work. I don't know how this is going to affect my job. I don't know how this is going to affect the different tasks that I do. All the things that come with change, right? So it's not just about like waiting for those pathways to change, but also understanding that you're flooded with emotion, right? So now you're fighting against two things. You're fighting against your emotions, and you're fighting against your old pathways. You're really thinking about working through your emotions, and then that those pathways, as they atrophy and as you're building the new pathways create that emotion, and so it really feels like mental static almost, right? And so so getting rid of those pathways is something that actually takes time, and what we really have to do is we have to work through the emotions, right, so that we can actually think with more of our prefrontal cortexes, right, getting that executive functioning back online, but also we have to give it time and to let ourselves know that all the emotions that we feel are completely normal, that they're going to come, and to normalize those emotions and just keep believing that if we repeat these behaviors, and as much as this became habit, right, learning to do something another way through repetition, right, through repeated practice is at the end of the day, done enough times will become just as easy and just as automatic. So holding on to that belief. It's kind of like driving on automatic and then going to learn stick shift.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Learning stick shift at first brings up so much, and your emotions might make you resistant to it, and it's going to feel clunky at first because your pathways is used to just putting it into drive and going.
Yeah.
But over time, when you start using that stick shift over and over and over again, it becomes just as natural, right, as when you were driving with the automatic.
Okay. This is good. This is fascinating because as leaders, we have to get people to use the stick shift.
Yes.
Right? So what kind of environments, or what should we do in order to foster them being able to make those changes? You know, what can we do?
The first thing that comes to mind is allow mistakes.
Okay.
They're going to happen. Know that your processes are going to slow down.
Okay.
Right?
Time for processes to slow. Okay.
Time for process to slow down as people learn. People to make mistakes, and people to feel all their emotions as they come up. Because what happens is one of the things that helps regulate those emotions is just allowing them to be there and being able to validate those emotions, like, absolutely this change is frustrating, absolutely this is different, absolutely this is slowing you down, and that's okay. And we're going to learn together. So being able to allow for that safe environment for people to come as they are during the change, and really leading with that mindset of belief and support, right? To be able to help people have that time to move towards change with the support that they need.
Okay, so if I'm the person that drives the old car, right? I know how to drive the automatic, and now everybody has to drive the stick shift. And I don't know how, and it's going to take me time. Am I still valuable?
Absolutely.
You know?
Think about the transferable skills, because the only thing that's really changed is the stick and the clutch.
Okay.
So it's possibly in that scenario adding on skills, but there are skills that are still transferable. And like we talk about with successes in the past, there have been ways that the people on your team have learned to do new things. Okay. So as long as you feel like they have the natural talent to do things, maybe they just need the experience. It's not that they don't have the skills to do it, it's that they don't have the skills yet. Okay. Right? Really being able to see if they can actually learn those new skills, and if they can't, that's okay. Then let's think about where we can actually position them, right, to help with the new skill in a different way. Okay, because the valuable of the information I have, the transferable skills was so valuable, right? So in the context of the metaphor we're using, I can think about the fact that I've learned how to avoid accidents, right? How to navigate slippery terrain, maybe over the years. How to deal with screaming kids in the back of the car when I'm trying to get from one destination to the next, right? I know the way there. I know the pathway there, even though we might be using another method to get there. So yeah, I think sometimes it's hard for. Sometimes leaders forget that there's value in the transferable skills. Yes. Because we can be so focused on the what's next. And even if we don't forget, we forget to let our people know that they're valuable. Yes. You know? And we know that they can do it. Because even if you think about the metaphor that we're using, when you're driving and you've had all the other driving skills, like you said, dealing with kids in the back, knowing where to go, being able to scan, right, your dashboard, your what's in front of you, what's next to you, what's behind you, doing all that actually can be interrupted. So it can look like they're not doing as well, or that they won't catch on. Because if you think about it, now that all of my resources, my mental resources are focused on this stick shift and this clutch, even the things that I used to be able to do with excellence are going to go offline for a while. Absolutely. Right? Because our mental energies are not focused there anymore. And because this change has disrupted everything, it disrupts everything else. Yeah. So understanding that it can look like there's a lot more chaos for a little bit of time, but it's because what they're learning does interrupt, right, their ability to do other things. But the thing is, because they already have a foundation, trusting that it'll come back online as soon soon as they learn to just work with the clutch and work with the shift.
Yeah. You know, it reminds me also of when I teach situational leadership, that a team could be what we call the delegating phase. So that means they know what they're doing, right? All the leader has to do is come in, give them some work, and delegate it to everybody, and he or she doesn't have to micromanage, right? Or they don't have to micromanage anything. But then you throw two new people in, right, to the team who are not familiar with the culture, not familiar with the projects, not familiar with the team. They don't know anyone. And so now it's like throwing in a stick shift. With a team that has been driving automatic, if we go back to the metaphor, right?
Yes.
And the leader forgets that they need to get in there and teach everybody how to drive together.
Yes.
And so then chaos ensues because we're not focused on what the team needs, because there's actually change that happens. Right? And a lot of times people feel like it's sink or swim. So for example, to go back to what you said, if the process is a little thrown off, there may be lower levels of productivity. However, the leaders are still holding them to the same level of productivity.
Yes.
Right? There may be lower levels of communication. However, the leader didn't define how they're going to communicate moving forward. Doesn't even know if people have other cultural preferences when it comes to communication. Doesn't even understand what other people's styles are as it relates to team, right? And so the leader forgets that we need to get the car going and we need to get it back up to speed, but there are some processes we have to go through before that happens.
Right.
Yeah.
And even just thinking about that situational leadership, even if it's a change for an individual person, understanding that when it comes to situational leadership, one of those factors is expertise. And if we're now going through change in a task or change in a process for this individual, and there's a change in their expertise now because they're not driving in automatic.
Right.
Understanding that portion we might have to micromanage just a little bit.
Just a little bit, right?
Just a little bit, right? Because we're not saying that they're not the expert anymore, but it's in that one task, right, that we want to build them up to that same expertise level that they have with the rest of their work.
Exactly. And the person that's actually been driving the automatic, you know, in my experience in coaching, they are actually more likely to be able to get up to speed when you just help them to learn how to drive the stick shift. Can't leave them out there wondering if they're valuable, wondering how they're going to do it, wondering how they're going to relate to the team, because there's all this pressure to perform at the same level, but the support's not there.
Yeah, and you know, that's the thing, is we use the word micromanage, and I think the word micromanage has a lot of negative connotations. So if we actually think about it the way you're speaking about it in terms of support, that they're going to need a little bit more support just in that area, understanding that this person has all the other skills, right? They know my culture, they know how this business operates, they know how the rest of the operation runs, right? That it's just this one area that they need support, and they're going to need time. And giving them that permission that, you know what, it's going to look clunky and it's going to feel clunky, and I get that. Yeah. Right? And I'm right there with you, and we're going to work through this together, because that's really, I think that's the best word to describe it, is everything's going to feel clunky.
Yeah, everything's going to feel clunky. And when you give your team the right training and you give your leaders the right training, your leaders know how to provide the team what they need in order for them to get back to the productivity level that is success, but also the team knows how to ask you for what they need, and they feel confident they can do so.
They can come to you and they feel the safety and the permission to say, this feels clunky, or this specific area is where I need help, or I'm not even understanding why I'm not doing well. I need someone to help me figure out what's going wrong. Right? It's building that culture where a person is able to come to you and feel safe enough to let you know that there are areas where I don't know how to operate. And that's okay, because it's all new.
So along that line, because this is good, this is really good. Along that line, what's the consequence if my leader and my team doesn't give me that support, and they just kind of throw change out there, and here I am thinking I'm inadequate because I can't catch on, or I can't, back to the metaphor, I can't drive the stick shift. What are some consequences you've seen?
Well, think about it just that way. If I threw you into a car and I told you drive stick shift and I gave you no support, what are the consequences?
I might crash.
You might crash, right?
Or I might quit.
That's what I was going to say. Best case scenario, they might just not do the job, right? Whether they quit or whether they refuse to do the task. Worst case scenario, they're going to try to operate it on their own, and they're going to crash, and it's going to create even more of a mess, right? So being able to build that space for people to come in and say, you know what, I really don't know how to run this thing. Not because I'm not good enough, not because I'm not valuable, but just because this is new to me. Because otherwise, you have fight, flight, or freeze, because it does become a threat, right? And your body will go into the threat response. And that's how people will respond, is fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah. And so I have a friend, actually a really good friend of mine. He's a VP at a large organization, and if we bring it to the practical, he had a team where excellent managers, they had been doing well for years. He has executive managers under him and then a team under them, and they began to scale. They grow more and more, and at the end of the year they realized they had a $4 million deficit. Right, big deal, right? And when I was coaching my friend, very good friend, he says, you know, I wasn't using situational leadership. I wasn't using the change management skills. Because the team had been so successful in the past, they were embarrassed to say they needed help, right? Because there was this expectation that they should be just as successful. And when we asked them if they could take on new things, of course the answer was yes, of course, right? And so it's a hard lesson to learn, but now they're understanding that whenever there's something new, whenever they're scaling, whenever there's new initiatives and new people, that they need to go back to, you know, managing the team closely and then get them up to speed, and then they can pull back. You know, so I'm mentioning that case study because even seasoned leaders who've had years of success in the workplace, over 20, 30 years, they can get into these sort of bad spaces when it comes to change management, not using the right techniques, and having to learn lessons that could cost your organization millions of dollars.
Right. And you know, if we think about it from just the culture level, right? Culture is created in crisis. So when change creates crisis, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean crisis for the bottom line, but it can be crisis, you know, for the individual, where they don't know how to operate and where they feel like they don't know how to do their job anymore. Depending on how well they feel supported, depending on how much they feel they're able to vocalize and ask for help, right, is really going to define what your culture looks like in the future. So even if you feel like it was okay then, and it didn't feel like it led to any mass, mass negative consequences in the short run, remember that you just added or taken away from your culture by either helping or not supporting or not supporting this person through crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. Fortunately, this organization decided to support the team through crisis. Everyone's still there and they're still working through it, and they get to revamp because they had this trust in the organization. But it's a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was an organization that was saying, we're willing to learn, right? We saw something happen, and rather than blame and rather than point fingers, we decided, you know what, there was change happening, there's something that was missing, and we're going to do better next time.
Having information is great. Having resources to help you expand upon that information is even better. Click on the QR code and you can go to our online course library where you'll find more information on this topic. In addition, you'll find other helpful topics for your team and for yourself.